Selena Gomez has finally released what is classified as her second studio album, Rare, which would be her sixth album overall, with the inclusion of her work with her band The Scene and her Disney solo effort Stars Dance. Her last album, Revival, was released in 2015, which I thought was a solid record. Half of the album was just general radio hits, and some of the tracks were a bit more personal. It was the album that I saw Selena truly trying to find her sound. It was also the first album of hers in which she had creative control and was very hands-on with her work. Even though Selena would rather us forget about her work with The Scene most of the time, I think that's where most of her gems within her music lies. When the Sun Goes Down, up until the release of Rare, was my favorite Selena Gomez album. Let's take a look at what I had to say about her previous work and her albums with The Scene.
So today I'm going to be rating Selena's albums through my personal taste and just reflecting throughout her very successful career. Starting with my least favorite album by her, Stars Dance, Selena's very first album without a band. Stars Dance was not a very good debut. It was heavily dubstep and EDM influenced and has its listenable moments, but the record falls flat entirely. You just wait for that one banger that will blow the album out of the water or the album's standout song, but it never comes. Sure, she has some attention grabbers, but nothing that makes you want to re-listen. This album was post-Disney Selena and she was still developing herself as an individual artist, but it didn't really sit well with me. A lot of this album sounds like Rihanna rejects, and I don't mean that in a bad way because she pulls it off with a few songs, but it lacks personality. Her personality, I should say. My favorites off this album is Stars Dance, Forget Forever, Come and Get It, and Birthday. Next up on the list, we have Selena's debut album with her band, The Scene, which was her first footing in music, and it plays off of the pop-punk era of that time. You can hear the Avril and Pink influence. I find this album to be very energetic and exciting. There's no definite low point in this album, since a lot of the album sounds quite similar, but it was a very typical teen pop album at that point in time. Although the album was pretty solid, it didn't seem like her. It seemed like a machine was behind her, which is understandable. She was just becoming a household name with Wizards of Waverly Place, and Disney had to make her as packaged as possible to appeal. This album showcases a very confident and young Selena with pretty catchy pop-punk tunes. My favorites off this album are Naturally, I Don't Miss You At All, and Falling Down. Then we have A Year Without Rain, her second album with The Scene, which completely switches her direction from pop-punk to dance pop, and a lot of auto-tune. This album is flooded with catchy, fun, enthusiastic songs, with A-list producers such as Red One and Rock Mafia to superstar writers such as Katy Perry. The album just falls in one area completely for me, which is the message. Yes, she has the cliche vulnerable and sad songs and the cliche fun and dance songs on here, but it's almost like it's only a collection of songs, not an album. There was absolutely no clear message with this album or what it was standing for. She did say it was dedicated to her fans and wanted to make people feel good, but I feel like that was just a token saying, seeing that a team of writers and producers were hired for this album. It just feels like every song of this album was made specifically to chart and not made of an artist, but while saying that, the album is still very fascinating. My favorites from this album are the title track, Rock God, Spotlight, and Ghost of You. Next we have When the Sun Goes Down, her last and final album with her band The Scene. This album also included A-list superstar writers such as Britney Spears and Katy Perry, to A-list producers, who she's frequently collaborated with. This album was a major step in her career and shows her blossoming one step at a time. This was towards the ending of her Disney show, and she was becoming a bit more explicit. We'll all never forget when she said damn and hit the lights, and we were completely shocked. When the Sun Goes Down is pretty much fully listenable. Every track is well crafted. You can hear the similarities with her older records through this one, but in a progressive way. I also really like the aesthetic she took on with this album. My favorites from this album are I Love You Like a Love Song, Outlaw, Whiplash, Hit the Lights, and Who Says. And lastly, her best album to date, I Was Wrong, I Was Extremely Wrong. Revival is amazing. It really is. It's a more personable album, and Selena has also had creative control. She writes the trends, but she does it to her liking, and this in a very refreshing way. It's an album where I feel she can actually start to be taken more seriously as an artist. The only thing this album sort of lacks is originality, but her vulnerability, delivery, and quality makes up for it. It's a very cohesive body of work, and it's nice to listen to. I really didn't remember it being so good, but it excels for an average Selena Gomez record, and has the right mix of fun songs and gloomy songs. It really is a very captivating record. My favorites off this album are Camouflage, Perfect, and Good For You. Now, songs that are in some of my top Selena songs that either aren't on the albums yet or weren't mentioned are Fetish, Feel Me, and The Heart Wants What It Wants.
My favorite albums would swap between When the Sun Goes Down and Revival, but I would definitely have to classify When the Sun Goes Down over Revival because it's aged better to me and barely has any skips. It's a great pop record, and I love everything about it from the cover to the aesthetics. A Year Without Rain has so many hidden gems as well, from the title track to Spotlight. It has some of her best dance pop records. Kiss and Tell was very Avril Lavigne pump pop inspired, and you can tell. Stars Dance is undoubtedly her worst album ever. I feel like most of the album consists of skips, the production is lacking all over, there's no clear direction or center focus for the album, and I feel like Disney was chasing the dubstep trend extremely hard with this one, and even tried to get Selena to take on this reggae teen persona as well, which is a page ripped straight from Rihanna's book. I feel like they were confused and just trying to successfully transition her into adulthood within her music, and it worked, but it just wasn't good. With Rare, what Selena was lacking in her previous works, from creative control to lack of cohesion or direction, sometimes off-putting production, she overturns it all and released a cohesive body of work, which happens to be her most personal. What I like about this album the most is you can tell where she was in her life, the messages she is trying to convey, and how it all affected her so clearly. And even though the record is filled with slow pop, it keeps your attention all the way through. She started off this era with Lose You to Love Me and Look at Her Now, which are great in their own right. However, they aren't a direct reflection of what the album sounds like, and somehow this album is an album I can only see Selena doing. There was nothing on this album that reminded me of another artist or something I could see someone else doing. For the first time, it was 100% Selena, which showcases her growth as an artist. This album is a reflection of self-love and going through trials and errors to finally be able to accept yourself fully and happily. And I think one of the main reasons I couldn't see anyone else doing this is because she made it so personal. This album also showcases some of her boldest and most expressive vocal performances, and has pretty flawless production all the way through. With the title track Rare, she talks about feeling underappreciated, and her lover isn't recognizing her worth. As she repeats, "It feels like you don't care, why don't you recognize I'm so rare?" And throughout the album, she gradually strays away from the want or need of her ex-lover's validation to make her feel better. With Dance Again, she celebrates her new freedom and talks about how amazing it feels to be back on the market. It feels like it's a fresh breakup song when she's still going through the grieving stages. With Ring, she finds her confidence again and is dating, but from my interpretation, it could also relate to her ex-lover who keeps ringing on her phone line. They're recognizing what they're missing, but instead of giving in, she just lets the phone ring. On the track Vulnerable, she details how she wanted to give her all to a past love and didn't want to let them go. As she says, "If the only other option is letting go, I'll stay vulnerable." On People You Know, she reminisces on her relationship and how at one point they were the closest people in the world, and now they don't know each other at all, which is an essential retrospective when dealing with breakups. She explores her mental health and trying to keep afloat with Let Me Get Me. Cut You Off is the point in the album where she finally sees herself letting go, and she ends the album with Sweeter Place, a reflection on where she's been and where she wants to go, and longing for a sweeter and better state of mind and peace. So as you can see, the album tells a very clear story, of course. These are simply my interpretations, but that's what I got from it. I'm so happy that this album isn't filled with those 2015 EDM choruses. I was a little worried because Selena did that back to back with Wolves, It Ain't Me, and Back to You. I'm glad she got the message and delivered a lot of fresh production. Sometimes it can be a bit minimal, but it works in her favor. You can catch her using her whisper tones and voice as an instrument throughout the record, which complements her very nicely. My favorites off this album are Ring, People You Know, Let Me Get Me, Cut You Off, and Sweeter Place. I also think Kid Cudi makes a great addition to the track, and it fits so well. This album is good, better than I expected, and it's very cohesive. It definitely gets my stamp of approval. If you guys haven't heard it, I definitely recommend that you go listen. And that about wraps it up. Tell me what you think about this new Selena Gomez record down below. Tell me if you like it, you hate it. What do you think about the production, the vocals, the lyrics, all of it? What is your favorite track? Don't forget to follow me on all of my social medias. Thanks for watching. Bye.